All right, so today we're diving into something, well, kind of tricky. Justice and bad luck. You ever get that feeling like when things are unfair, not because of anything you did, but just
Yeah.
bad luck? It feels wrong, doesn't it? Like something's off. Makes you wonder, what even is luck and how should a just society deal with it?
Yeah, it's a powerful intuition that bad luck can be a source of injustice. And that's a huge motivator for philosophers to really dig into this. To get a handle on it, we got to break down the concept of luck itself and see how different ideas of justice play into it.
And for this deep dive, we've got a great resource, right? The Justice and Bad Luck entry from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, the SEP. Now, anyone who knows the ASEP knows it's super in-depth. It's like having the ultimate expert guide to this topic, way beyond just surface-level stuff.
Totally. The SFP gives you that solid foundation, that careful analysis you need when you're dealing with these slippery concepts like luck and justice. Perfect for anyone who really wants to understand it, like someone who enjoys getting into the nitty-gritty of philosophical arguments and wants to think about these issues with more, precision.
Yeah, exactly. So, our mission today, simple. Unpack these concepts, luck and justice. Explore how philosophers have thought about whether and how luck should be neutralized in a just society. Basically, give you the tools to think critically about those inequalities we see all around us, so you can understand the philosophical debates that shape our views on fairness. Okay, so luck. Seems simple enough, right? But clearly it's more complicated than that. Where do we even start?
I think a good place to begin is realizing that luck isn't just one thing. The entry, drawing on Thomas Nagel, highlights at least 4 different types of luck. And once you see those, you realize how much luck really influences our lives.
Okay, 4 types. The first one being resultant luck, the luck in how our actions actually turn out. Got any examples, something to make it click?
Sure, think about someone who invests their money, they do their research, everything looks good, then bam, some huge global event happens. Like the entry mentions the invasion of Ukraine. Suddenly, their investments tank through no fault of their own. That's bad resultant luck, affecting a decision that was initially sound. Even well-planned actions can get messed up by stuff you just can't predict.
Shows how the world can really throw you a curveball, even when you're trying to be in control. Then there's circumstantial luck, the luck of the circumstances you're in when making choices. How does that work?
Circumstantial luck is all about those chance situations we find ourselves in. Imagine 2 researchers, both equally skilled. One gets all the time they need, plenty of resources, and a supportive environment to solve a problem. The other one is rushed, lacks data, and faces constant distractions. Even if they work equally hard, the first one's much more likely to succeed just because they're in a better situation. And whether someone ends up in those favorable conditions, often just pure luck.
So it's not just about your own skill, but the context you're in. Makes sense. Okay, what about constitutive luck? That sounds like it's about who we are at our core.
It is. Constitutive luck is about the kind of person you are. Your personality, talents, predispositions. Like someone might be genetically resistant to a disease while someone else with the same lifestyle gets it. Or someone who's just naturally charismatic, they might have an easier time in certain careers. Not just because of their efforts, but because of these inborn traits. Even these fundamental aspects of ourselves are, in a sense, a matter of luck.
Makes you think we don't choose those basic capacities we start with. And the last one Nagel mentions, antecedent causal luck. What's that about?
Antecedent causal luck looks at how our actions are shaped by, well, everything that came before them. Imagine a child growing up in a home full of books, encouragement to learn. They'll probably develop a strong intellectual curiosity. Another child raised in a deprived environment might not have that same foundation. The circumstances of their upbringing, something they had no control over, influences who they become, their choices. That's antecedent causal luck in a nutshell. It suggests that even our choices are influenced by a chain of events, many of them just chance occurrences.
Wow. So putting it all together, it's hard to see where luck doesn't play a role. Nagel says the area of life free from luck seems to shrink dramatically. That's kind of mind-blowing. So luck's everywhere, but how does it relate to justice? Not every lucky or unlucky event seems unfair, does it?
Yeah, you're right. Luck might be everywhere, but not all luck is relevant to justice. It's the kind of luck that affects someone's vital interests, their well-being, access to resources, opportunities that raises concerns about fairness. When bad luck leads to demonstrably worse outcomes in these areas, it's natural to feel something's unjust, to ask, why me? What did I do to deserve this? That sense of undeserved misfortune is at the heart of this whole philosophical exploration.
Yeah, especially when you think about something like where someone's born. It's pure chance, but it determines so much.
Hmm.
Their access to healthcare, education, even basic safety. It just feels wrong, doesn't it, that someone born into poverty in one country faces such different hurdles than someone born into privilege somewhere else, just because of where they happen to pop out.
Mm.
That intuition of unfairness is a powerful place to start thinking about justice.
Exactly. That feeling of unfairness stemming from circumstances you didn't choose and can't control, that's what drives a lot of the philosophical work on luck and justice. The underlying idea being that those luck-driven disparities are morally problematic and need to be examined, especially when we see all the inequalities that exist in the world. Okay, so we've established that luck is multifaceted, that it has a huge impact on our lives. How do we then connect it to our ideas about justice?
Well, the entry makes a helpful distinction between two types of justice, right? Retributive justice, which deals with punishment for wrongdoing, and distributive justice, which focuses on the fair allocation of resources and opportunities. For today's deep dive, we're going to focus on distributive justice, the who gets what and why of a just society.
Right. And within distributive justice, it's useful to consider what are called end result principles. These principles evaluate how just a distribution of goods is just by looking at the final pattern without necessarily needing to know the history of how it came about. It's like taking a snapshot of society and judging its fairness based on that image alone.
So you're saying we just look at who ends up with what and decide if it's just, regardless of how they got there. Can you give us some examples of these end result principles and how luck fits in?
Sure. There's crude egalitarianism, which says any inequality is bad. Everyone should have the exact same amount. Then there's crude sufficientarianism, which focuses on making sure everyone has enough to meet their basic needs. Prioritarianism says we should give more weight to helping those who are already worse off. The difference principle, which John Rawls is famous for, states that inequalities are okay only if they benefit the least well-off in society. And finally, utilitarianism aims to maximize overall happiness or well-being for everyone.
Okay, so how does luck tie into these different principles?
Well, in a couple of ways. First, some of these principles are defended by using the idea of neutralizing luck. Like, an egalitarian might argue for equal outcomes precisely because they see differences arising from luck as unfair, the idea being that a just society is one where we've minimized the influence of arbitrary luck. Second, many philosophers who support these principles add caveats, saying deviations from the ideal distribution are only okay if they don't result from bad luck. Luck acts like a filter for judging fairness. We might tolerate some inequality, but not if it's just because someone got dealt a bad hand.
This brings us to John Rawls, right? And his ideas about the social and natural lotteries seems pretty central to understanding luck and justice.
Absolutely. In his famous book, A Theory of Justice, Rawls used these metaphors to show how luck shapes our lives. The social lottery refers to those circumstances we're born into, like our family's wealth, education, social connections. The natural lottery is about the talents and abilities we're born with, intelligence, physical abilities, natural aptitudes. Rawls argued that the outcomes of both these lotteries are, just like in a real lottery, matters of pure chance. We don't pick our circumstances, and we don't choose our talents.
And because they're matters of luck, Rawls argued that we can't say we deserve our starting advantages. We didn't earn our privileged upbringing any more than someone else earned a less fortunate one, and we didn't choose our genetic gifts. This really challenges the idea that inequalities are just because some people deserve more than others.
Precisely. Since we can't claim to deserve these initial advantages, Rawls argued that theories of justice based on merit or desert are problematic. He criticized what he called a system of natural liberty, where everyone has the same legal rights to pursue advantages and we're judged solely on merit. Rawls said even this seemingly fair system is unjust because it allows the random outcomes of the social and natural lotteries to heavily influence who gets what in society. Someone born with more talent into a better environment will likely do better not because they're more deserving, but because they won the initial lottery of life.
But Rawls doesn't just see luck as a negative thing to overcome, right? He also has this idea of natural talent as a common asset. How does that work?
That's a key part of his theory. He says because natural talents are ultimately a matter of luck, we should see them not as individual property, but as shared resources. People with more talent are allowed to benefit, but only in ways that also benefit those who are less fortunate in the natural lottery. This connects directly to his difference principle, allowing inequalities only if they make the least advantaged better off. It's about redressing those undeserved inequalities that come from the natural lottery.
So it's about using those natural advantages to help everyone, especially those at the bottom. Like saying some people got lucky in the talent lottery, but the rules of the game should ensure everyone gets a fair shot. Now, the entry then moves on to philosophers often labeled luck egalitarians. Who are they, and how do they build on Rawls' ideas?
Yeah, after Rawls' work, a bunch of egalitarian philosophers like Richard Arneson, G.A. Cohen, and Ronald Dworkin put luck front and center in their theories. They took Rawls's insights about the arbitrariness of the lotteries and ran with them, arguing that a just society should, as much as possible, neutralize the effects of that brute luck. Important to note, though, that they don't all love the luck egalitarian label, and their theories have differences. But their work collectively represents a deeper engagement with how luck affects equality and justice.
And what would you say is a core idea they share, despite those differences?
A big one is the belief that inequalities in wealth, well-being, opportunities that result from sheer, unchosen luck are unfair and need to be fixed. Ronald Dworkin, for example, argued that wealth differences arising solely from what he called genetic luck are unjust. To address this, he proposed this thought experiment, a hypothetical insurance market. Imagine people, before they know their talents or disadvantages, deciding how much insurance they buy against potential misfortunes, including lacking valuable skills. The outcome of this hypothetical market would then show how a just society should compensate for these initial inequalities in a way that respects people's choices about risk.
That's an interesting thought experiment. What's the takeaway for real-world justice?
The insurance market idea is meant to reveal our intuitions about fairness. By imagining ourselves in that situation, totally uncertain about our own endowments, we can think about what risks we'd want to protect ourselves against. The amount of insurance we'd choose for, say, not having marketable skills, would then suggest how much redistribution might be needed in a just society to balance out those differences in genetic luck. Another important figure, G.A. Cohen, really emphasized the moral difference between inequalities from voluntary choices and those imposed by luck. For Cohen, egalitarian justice should minimize how much people's lives are determined by sheer luck, as opposed to their actions.
So the goal is to separate the effects of luck from the effects of choice, right? Compensate for the former, but let individuals deal with the consequences of the latter. And this brings us to the distinction between thin luck and thick luck. What's the difference?
That's a helpful distinction, yeah. Clarified by philosophers like Susan Hurley and Peter Valentine, thin luck is the basic, minimal idea. It just says an outcome is lucky for someone if they're not morally responsible for it or if they don't deserve it. So if Y is thin responsibility luck for X, it simply means X isn't morally responsible for Y. Doesn't say why, though. Thick luck goes further, trying to explain why. It pinpoints the non-moral reasons for the absence of responsibility or desert.
Got an example to illustrate.
Yeah.
Let's start with thin responsibility luck.
Okay. Imagine a storm destroys your crops, and there was nothing you could have done to prevent it. The crop destruction is thin responsibility luck for you. You're not morally responsible for it. Now, for a thick account, we might say you're not responsible because you couldn't control the weather. That's a thick, control-based account. Or we could say you're not responsible because the storm wasn't a result of your choices, a thick, choice-based account. The thin notion just says no responsibility, while the thick one tries to explain why that is.
Okay, thin luck is the label, thick luck is the explanation. And thin desert luck, that just means someone doesn't deserve something, without saying why.
Right. Thin desert luck simply means X doesn't deserve Y. It's neutral on the reasons. Different theories of desert would offer different thick accounts, like a theory that says desert is about contributing to society versus a theory that says it's about effort. The key is thin responsibility luck and thin desert luck are independent. You can be responsible for something you don't deserve, like a soldier following orders, or deserve something you didn't cause, like inheriting money from a distant relative.
Makes sense. Thick luck adds the Y to the no responsibility or no desert of thin luck. Now, the entry mentions cases where different thick accounts of responsibility luck, control-based versus choice-based, might disagree. Like in those Frankfurtian scenarios. Can you remind us what those are and why this matters?
Frankfurtian scenarios are those thought experiments where an agent makes a choice and acts, but there was this hidden mechanism that would have caused the same outcome even if they chose differently. So they seem responsible because they intentionally chose the action, even though they didn't really have control over the outcome. This shows how control-based and choice-based accounts can differ. The agent lacks ultimate control but still makes a choice. Which account better captures our ideas about responsibility and luck in these cases?
Right, those are some tricky ones.
Yeah.
And then there's the example of someone who develops a strong preference for driving, but then gas prices skyrocket. This shows how what we consider luck depends on how we define the outcome. The preference itself wasn't bad luck, but the negative consequences due to external factors might be. Then there's G.A. Cohen's counterfactual choice idea, refining the choice-based account. What's that about?
Cohen uses counterfactual choice to deal with situations where someone didn't choose a circumstance but wouldn't change it even if they could because it's become part of who they are, like religious guilt. Someone might be raised in a religion and feel guilty without ever choosing that religion, but now their beliefs are so central to them that they wouldn't want to be free from the guilt. Cohen argues that in these cases, the guilt isn't really bad luck requiring compensation because, in a way, they embrace it.
So it's about whether, on reflection, you'd keep the source of the outcome. Okay, moving on. Just like with responsibility luck, there are thick accounts of desert luck, non-comparative and comparative. What's the difference?
Thick, non-comparative desert luck says an outcome is luck for someone if they don't deserve it based on their own merits. It's a direct link between what they've done and what they get. Thick, comparative desert luck adds a relational element. It says an outcome is luck for someone if they don't deserve it compared to what someone else has based on their relative merits. Think of two farmers whose crops get destroyed. If a hardworking farmer's crops are ruined, that's bad non-comparative desert luck. But if another farmer, who worked even harder, also loses their crops, then the first farmer's loss isn't necessarily bad comparative desert luck. Neither got what their efforts deserved.
I get it. One is about absolute deservedness, the other is relative to others. Okay, beyond those tied to responsibility and desert, there's independent notions of luck, like lottery luck. How does that fit in with justice?
Lottery luck is an example of luck that might be relevant to justice regardless of responsibility or desert. In a fair lottery, everyone has an equal chance, regardless of their merits. The outcome is pure chance. Some theories might say inequalities from this kind of luck are problematic, even if the process was fair. Plus, as the entry points out, lotteries can be used to avoid bias in distributing things, even if the outcomes are still luck-based. Like, a lottery for scarce resources might be seen as fairer than relying on potentially biased human judgment.
So randomness can sometimes be fair. Now, how much luck shapes our lives seems to depend on our views about free will and determinism. The entry talks about hard determinism versus compatibilism. How do those views affect our understanding of luck?
This is a big one. Hard determinism says everything, even our choices, is causally determined, and that this rules out free will. It implies that everything is ultimately luck, because we're never truly in control. If hard determinism is true, then all outcomes can be traced back to factors we didn't choose. This could mean that luck egalitarianism ends up demanding complete equality of outcome, since no one's truly responsible. Compatibilism, on the other hand, says free will can exist alongside determinism. Compatibilists would generally limit the scope of luck, saying we're responsible for at least some of our choices. But even then, inequalities arising from very different choice situations where some people have much worse options could still be seen as unjust, a form of bad luck.
So our beliefs about free will have huge implications for how we see luck and what justice demands. Then there's this potentially tricky principle, the regression principle. What's that, and why is it a problem?
The regression principle says if the causes of an outcome are luck for you, then the outcome itself is luck for you too. If we combine this with those thick accounts of luck that emphasize control or choice, we might end up saying everything we do, everything that happens to us is luck. The reasoning being, to be truly responsible for something, you'd have to be responsible for its causes and the causes of those causes and so on, all the way back to stuff you had no control over, like your birth, your upbringing. As Nagel said, if you go back far enough, everything seems to result from things outside our control.
Sounds like an infinite loop of luck. The entry says this is often used as an argument against control or choice-based accounts, but it also warns against dismissing it too quickly.
Well, even if we don't buy the idea that everything is luck, this principle highlights a real challenge for understanding responsibility. If we agree that sometimes people aren't fully responsible, like when criminal behavior is linked to childhood abuse, we need to explain why without just saying they lacked ultimate control over everything leading up to it. Some philosophers, like Fisher and Ravizza, with their idea of the process of taking responsibility, and Hurley, emphasizing reason-responsive mechanisms, try to ground responsibility in something more immediate. They say responsibility comes from acting on reasons that reflect your values and capacities, even if those were shaped by factors outside your initial control.
So they're trying to find that balance, acknowledge the past without saying no one's ever responsible. Now, a key distinction in luck egalitarianism is Dworkin's separation of option luck and brute luck. Explain that one.
This is central to Dworkin's theory. Very influential. He defines option luck as the outcome of deliberate, calculated gambles that you could have avoided. Things like investing in stocks, betting on horses. Brute luck is about outcomes from risks that aren't deliberate gambles. These are the misfortunes that just happen, like getting struck by lightning or having a genetic disease. Classic examples. Going blind from an unforeseen genetic condition, brute luck, versus winning the lottery, you entered option luck.
And insurance is a big part of how Dworkin connects these two types, right?
Absolutely. He says choosing to buy or not buy insurance is itself a gamble, option luck. If you could have insured against something bad but didn't, then if it happens, it's arguably bad option luck, not brute luck. By not insuring, you're taking that risk. This affects how we think about justice, because Dworkin says we should generally compensate for bad brute luck, but not bad option luck.
The entry points out, though, that this distinction isn't always so clear-cut and has been criticized. What are some of the challenges?
Well, there are tricky cases. What if you have to choose between risky options, all with potentially bad outcomes? Like choosing between two medical treatments, both with possible side effects. If one leads to a bad outcome, it's not so clear it's just option luck you're responsible for. Or what about someone morally obligated to take a risk? A rescuer gets injured saving someone. It seems wrong to call their injury just bad option luck. And then there are strategic situations, like the prisoner's dilemma, where outcomes result from choices but feel unjust because someone's being exploited. These cases suggest the line between brute and option luck can be blurry, and that just focusing on deliberate gambles might miss other aspects of fairness.
Those examples show how hard it can be to apply this distinction in real life, where choices are often limited or have moral implications. But even with the difficulties, the option-brute luck divide has been really influential. What are some of the main views on how justice should respond to each type?
Most luck egalitarians agree that justice should neutralize the effects of brute luck. It's seen as unfair to be worse off just because of bad fortune. Option luck is more controversial. Dworkin said justice doesn't generally require compensating for the outcomes of option luck. People should deal with the consequences of their choices. Peter Valentine offers a more nuanced view. He says justice allows, but doesn't demand, neutralizing option luck. It depends on whether doing so would improve initial opportunities and if the risks were known beforehand. Others, like Mark Fleurbe, say justice requires some compensation even for bad option luck, especially when people end up severely deprived, which raises questions about justice versus charity. And then there's all-luck egalitarianism, which says unequal outcomes from option luck are just as unjust as those from brute luck, but the state might not always be justified in intervening.
It comes down to how much weight we give to responsibility for choices made in uncertain or unequal situations. Now, the entry then gets into the idea of neutralizing luck itself. Is the goal of justice just to get rid of luck's influence?
That's the question Susan Hurley raises. She says justice as luck neutralization can be seen in two ways: defining egalitarianism or justifying it. She argues it fails both ways. She uses her desert island example. One island has fertile soil by chance, the other's barren. Redistributing to make everyone equally well off doesn't eliminate the initial luck. The equality itself is a product of that initial luck. Eliminating inequality from luck doesn't mean getting rid of the luck itself.
So even the act of equalizing can be caused by the very luck we're trying to neutralize. The entry mentions the counter-argument that maybe neutralizing luck just means eliminating the effects of luck.
Right, that's a key point. The goal isn't to erase luck from the universe, which is probably impossible, but to stop it from systematically disadvantaging some people over others in arbitrary ways. Richard Arneson, for example, says equality of opportunity for welfare is the main egalitarian ideal, and responsibility for choices allows some deviation from that. Cohen argues similarly, saying luck neutralization isn't the ultimate reason for egalitarianism. It's a deeper commitment to fairness that makes us oppose inequalities based on luck. And that same commitment can lead us to reject strict equality if it ignores people's choices.
So it's less about mechanically removing luck and more about being fair in the face of things we can't control while respecting choice and responsibility. And this leads to another tricky issue: the non-separability of luck and effort. We tend to think talent is luck, but effort is something we control. But what if they're connected?
That's a big challenge for luck egalitarian theories. What if the effort someone puts in is influenced by their talents or their upbringing, both of which are arguably luck-based? Someone naturally gifted at something might find it easier to put in the effort and excel, whereas someone who struggles might get discouraged and put in less effort even if they tried equally hard initially. The tables in the entry show this. If talent and effort are totally separate, we can imagine a distribution that compensates for talent but rewards effort. But if talent affects effort, someone less talented having to work much harder for the same result, it's much harder to figure out a luck-neutralizing distribution. Do we compensate for the lack of talent or just reward the actual effort?
The entry point out that the two main ways to respond both have problems. If we ignore how lack of talent might affect effort, we fail to address the intuition that this lack of talent is itself unfair. But if we try to account for hypothetical effort, what someone would have done with different talents, we might end up rewarding people differently for the same actual effort, which is strange from a responsibility standpoint.
Exactly. Trying to reconcile thick accounts of luck with neutralizing based on hypothetical effort seems to push us towards a much broader view of luck. Maybe even saying all inequality is unjust, which many luck egalitarians aren't comfortable with.
Shows how hard it is to implement a theory that tries to neutralize luck when luck seems so intertwined with our actions. Finally, the entry talks about relational egalitarianism and its critique of luck egalitarianism.
Hmm.
What's the main disagreement there?
Relational egalitarians like Elizabeth Anderson, Michael Wolff, Samuel Scheffler say luck egalitarians focus too much on distributing things fairly correcting for bad luck and neglect egalitarian social relationships. Wolff says our pursuit of distributive justice should be limited by concerns for respect and inclusion, even if it means not achieving perfect equality of opportunity. Anderson goes further, saying the main goal should be to abolish oppressive hierarchies, ensuring everyone has equal social standing and can participate equally in society. Distribution becomes secondary, mainly important for how it affects those relationships.
So it's less about who has what and more about how we treat each other, making sure everyone's respected and included. What do luck egalitarians say to that?
They have a few responses. Some say social standing is itself a good that should be distributed equally, considering responsibility. Others say luck egalitarianism and relational egalitarianism are tackling different but compatible parts of justice. One's about fair distribution, the other's about good social relations. They also point out potential problems with radical relational egalitarianism. Like, what about differences in well-being that don't affect democratic equality or social standing? It raises the question of whether we should focus on distributing things fairly, given the role of luck, or on creating equal and respectful social relationships. Some even suggest a combination might be possible, like luckist versions of relational egalitarianism that take responsibility into account.
Man, that was quite a journey through a really complex topic. We covered the types of luck, the theories of justice and how they handle luck, the challenges of defining and neutralizing it, the option-brute luck distinction and its issues, and the critique from relational egalitarians. Clearly, the relationship between justice and bad luck is a tough philosophical nut to crack.
Absolutely. Our goal today was to give you a solid understanding of these debates, based on that in-depth analysis from the SECP. This is a field where philosophers are constantly refining their theories, wrestling with these fundamental questions about fairness and equality in a world shaped by chance.
So, one last thing to think about. Given that luck is everywhere, from our genes to our upbringing to the random events we encounter, how should societies be structured to be fair and equal? How do we balance responsibility with acknowledging those things we can't control? We encourage you to look at the inequalities around you and apply these ideas. And if you want to dive deeper, check out the Justice and Bad Luck entry in the SECP. It's a great resource for anyone who wants to really understand this stuff.
It's definitely worth the read, full of thought-provoking stuff.